In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. The dream is free. The soul is sold separately without batteries. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're exploring three powerful themes: the soul of music, artistic freedom in educations, and transcending culture through sound. Our guest today is Jonathan Taylor, a world-renowned classical guitarist with over 300 licensed tracks and 200 videos. From mastering the traditional Spanish repertoire to innovating with film scores, American folks, and psychedelic classics on solo guitar, Jonathan has made it his mission to bring classical music to everyone, everywhere. If this conversation moves you, please show your support with a like, share, or a quick review. It helps more people discover content that truly resonates. Let's begin. Mr. Jonathan Taylor, how are you doing? Welcome on the Meaningful Podcast.
Very good, thank you.
It's great to have you, and we have this lovely Sunday to share with each other, which is quite beautiful. To kick us off, tell us more about Guitar Chronicles.
Guitar Chronicles is an album that is put out by Hit Lab and Warner Brothers, and it is a compilation of 12 tracks, about an hour and 10 minutes or something, of music, of transcriptions that I did for American folk music of the 19th century. Also, I adapted 2 film scores, believe it or not, to solo classical guitar, which was from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and also the 007 themes from the Bond films, and then a couple Spanish masterpieces. Leyenda is on there by Albéniz, which originally, by the way, was a piano piece. A lot of people don't know that because it sounds so natural on the guitar. And also Sevilla, and many other pieces.
Beautiful. Yes. And it's one of your 32 albums, is that correct?
That is correct.
Very, very extensive catalog, and we'll dive into all of that in a second. But I want to bring you back, all right, from the very beginning of that journey, because I was reading a little bit about how you got into music, and obviously how your grandmother obviously inspired you to do so. I'd really love if you can kind of bring us back to and talk to me about how you fall in love with music, and more specifically how your grandmother basically inspired you to get started within that path.
Sure. My grandmother was born in 1889. Therefore, she was a Victorian. And so when I tell people, like, my mother, took care of the family. I only knew my father later in life. But I should say I knew him in infancy, but not much until later in life. And my grandmother was a silent film organist. That means before there were talkies, she played with all the people in the Orpheum circuit, which was owned by Mr. Fox, who later started 20th Century Fox Studios. And so what do I mean she played with all the people of the era? Well, in that era, in the teens and the 20s, as there were no talkies yet coming up, I can't remember the year of the jazz singer that was the first talkie, but she played with Charlie Chaplin, for example. And people say, well, why would she be playing with Charlie Chaplin when she was the organist at the film house and I go, well, there'd be like red carpet things to promote the film. And she played with Lon Chaney Sr., who was called the Man of 1,000 Faces because he did the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He did Phantom of the Opera, you know that one.
Yes.
And his son, of course, was Lon Chaney Jr., which is the Wolfman. And Lawrence Talbot, even a man who says his prayers by midnight, when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright, she'll become a werewolf. Wonderful. And so she played with people of that era. She did many gigs with Houdini, with Harry Houdini.
Nice.
Who did a lot in New York, but he was all over the country, like Michigan or Minnesota or whatever, and in the Pacific Northwest and that, because he'd, be in the tank of water and the chains and trying to get out, and oh my God, he's going to drown, and, all that drama, but the greatest escape artist that ever lived. And so she played in a time period with those notables, Harold Lloyd, the Keystone Cops, and others. Who's the great stone face? Buster Keaton. The General was the big film he did. So my grandmother would be playing around the house, of course, and she had a piano, and she had toured all over, made, for her era and for who she was, made a lot of money for a woman and for the time period.
Sure.
So I would listen to her, and I'm sure I picked up on that, like I'm 4 or 5. And what shall I say? Picking tunes out with the ukulele because my little fingers could only do that. And then later on, as time went on, as 10, I was studying guitar, and I listened to Segovia records. I heard Segovia in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in downtown Los Angeles, and that pretty much sealed the deal. I wanted to create the beautiful music. I couldn't believe his fingers were doing what they're doing, and I couldn't believe the beautiful sound. And when people ask me, well, how did you become that? And I go, well, that is a mystery, isn't it? What is it that why one person sits in the audience completely satisfied and happy to be a listener, and another person wants to be it or create it? And so people say, why is that? And I go, why is our orange yellow star the sun in the exact orbit it is? I mean, you can ask lots of questions that I have no idea.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you started to play basically ukulele at 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And then just gradually basically come to this very interesting path of mastery, commitment to mastery. One thing that I always admire, Jonathan, by not only musicians, but people of all fields, is people in which pick one thing and do it basically tirelessly for decades and decades, and therefore becomes masters. It seemed like you decided to do such thing at the age of 14, right, with the guitar, and just made a profound commitment to what seemed to be not only yourself, but sort of life.
Swore an oath, literally.
Yeah.
And by the way, you said that you always like to go out with a quote. Well, I'm going to give that quote right now.
Sure.
The dream is free. The hustle is sold separately without batteries.
Wow.
So that is when people say, I also believe that very few people realize their childhood dream. I wanted to become one of the top 10. In other words, I think very few people, they get married, have kids, they do this money, all this other stuff. And I go, well, if you take your eye off the ball will roll away. And so I think that single-mindedness of purpose. It's been said that courage is first of your virtues, but forbearance also, and I'll discuss this like on a philosophical level. One says all virtues are guaranteed by courage and could not exist unless courage was at first present. And I say, but the courage to forbear or the courage to keep on keeping on is that tied up with the idea of courage. It's a philosophical, I don't know if it has an answer, but it's something to consider that, okay, yes, and maybe it's just foolish to rank them. But on the other hand, I think that we become diverted by shiny objects. Here's a shiny object. And I go, well, what's it going to get you? Cheesecake has no nutrition.
Right. You know,
right?
exactly. No, I think you're absolutely correct, and it's actually my first time hearing this quote. Is it yours?
I don't know. Maybe.
All right, but it's good. It's good. That's the only thing that matters. When do you think, for you, was it a haha moment when you decided that basically guitar was what you wanted to do in life,
About
or was
16.
gradually just
About 16. And when you listen to pop music like everyone in the world does, and you read, there's four instruments basically, and when I realized that Segovia, meaning a piece by Bach, it's doing two and three things, maybe four at one time. You don't even need the group. In other words, you have a complete whole without other members. And that's not to denigrate, other styles of music or, quartets and quartets or anything like that. But it's to also say that the guitar in the pop music field is used usually as either chords or a lead line, meaning single strings and then accompanying chords. And that can be done. It's not polyphonic. In other words, the classical guitar is polyphonic, many voiced. And so that's what appealed to me.
interesting? I'm wondering what was sort of the main challenges that you had at first? Because obviously before becoming a master, there's always this interesting portions that we call basically, and I call very famously.
There is no pedagogy, to answer your question directly. The violin and the piano have a pedagogy, meaning teaching methods throughout hundreds of years. Right? The piano, born in Bach's time, and he hated the piano. He loved the organ. Bach went 50 miles from his home to Kärnten. He was in Kärnten or Weimar, I don't remember, because he was Kapellmeister from both. And his buddy said, and you take a carriage ride 50 miles back then, Jesus Christ, you'll break your back. And so he went and and they wanted to show him a piano, and he hated it. And it's very ironic because many of Bach's works are played on the piano, as you know. And so to get back to your point, what was the point?
I was just obviously before you become a master, there's always the challenges along the way. What was some of those?
Yeah. Okay. Here's what I mean. The pedagogies for the classical guitar are very small, meaning the teaching methods, meaning the path forward. In the case of the real classical guitarists, you stand at the edge of the dark forest and enter where there is no path and start making your own. So are there hints and suggestions and certain things? Absolutely, yes. But if you don't have an open mind and experimentation, you're never going to create the light bulb. In other words, you're never going to get anywhere with it. Even though I studied with the great masters like Pepe Romero, Frederick Node, Christopher Parkening, I studied jazz with Joe Pass, So even that it's great, but in the end, you find your own way.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So because the standard is sort of wider, there's more interpretation for the role that you want to take, and therefore there's sort of a wider definition of what master is. For example, and obviously you do classical music, which is quite lovely. I just came back from seeing an interpretation of the Fifth Symphony of Prokofiev with my mother, which was absolutely beautiful. It seems sort of also the way you manage formal educations with obviously your musical paths was sort of a very interesting journey. You started at Chapman University from what I was able to retrieve, and you sort of had a full basically presidential scholarship there. How was it to basically study music on your own since you were 5 with your grandmother and so on, and then afterwards formally diving deeper into it with masters in a more of a academical sense? Was that an easy transition for you?
Well, yes, because at first a musician usually just learns by ear. They listen to a record or something and then keep trying to imitate it and create it. That's normal. And then later you learn academically how to read music, theory, and practice. When I was at Chapman, and by the way, when I was at Chapman, it wasn't a university. It was a private college.
Oh, interesting.
It had 850 people, and you actually had to be something to be there. In other words, it didn't have the government money and all that stuff that they have now. And I go, no, it was actually at first a religious. It wasn't religious when I went there, but it was a Disciples of Christ college started at the time Lincoln was in office. Okay. So, I mean, and that's, pretty far back there, but it then went the university route. But to say, what did I do to transition? I studied composition. So I was a real composer, meaning legitimate classical music, symphony. It's much easier to compose for the instruments of the orchestra than to arrange or transcribe for the classical guitar. Much easier. And a lot of people think that's funny or crazy or that. And I go, well, try it. You'll see. And so the instruments of the orchestra tuned in thirds, guitar tuned in fourths, except 1/3, of course, differentiates the voicings. And I studied not just, the major minor system, meaning the theory of what should be a common practice of tonality from Pythagoras on, but also, dodecaphony, chordal systems, bitonality, Babbitt squares, in other words, a vast arena of many other compositional techniques. And so I was able to then, of course, employ that by doing what kind of became my mission, was to increase the repertoire of the solo classical guitar. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you have wonderful solo classical guitar. That's my phone in the background over there. That you have a wonderful, you know what? I should get that.
Sure.
Let me look at that. I'll be right back. Be right back. I promise. That's a podcaster. Okay, so where was I? Saying that, so compositionally, you're using those techniques to arrange for the solo, adapting pieces. I'll give you an example. I took American folk songs, as I mentioned, the 19th century, adapted them to kind of a magnum opus with the film scores I mentioned, and then also pieces that are not only heretofore never been transcribed or adapted, but from disparate genres. For example, psychedelic love. I have an album. It's all psychedelic music on the classical guitar. Now, that sounds ridiculous when you hear that. And I go, but when you listen, you realize, my God, it works. And then pieces from, jazz, for example, right? And transferring pieces of contemporary Polish music or Japanese kodo music or music of every era, from Renaissance to Baroque to classical to romantic to contemporary, that one can imagine.
Interesting. And you were also under the tutelage of legends. Actually, you mentioned Pepe Romero. You were also under Frederick Noah, which is Noah. Excuse me, I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Actually,
it's Noad.
Noah. Yeah.
Node.
Okay, there you go. You see, there's a few variation. Okay. Frederick Node. And so it was when you're thinking about what it is to obviously study under these giants, how do you think that was shapes your way to approach classical guitar in the first place?
Sure. Well, I knew when I was about 22 or something like that I needed to study with a great master. I needed to study with somebody who was at the top of the game. Well, Pepe Romero is one of the greatest guitarists in the world. And he's wonderful. And I studied privately. I went to a performance. I found a connection. I found a way to get to him, so to speak. And people say, how do you do that? And I go, it's so convoluted. I go, it's perfect. You put it out in the universe and the universe helps you. So and so I met him and auditioned for him, and he deigned to teach me for 5 years privately at his home. And so I studied with him privately, and that really ratcheted up my playing. And then did a master class with Christopher Parkening. I had actually called and found out Christopher Parkman when he was 16, but he was so busy touring, he couldn't take private students. But later on, I did study with him. He said, Jonathan, I can't take any privates. I'm in, France or something, right? Wherever he was. And I said, I understand. And then I studied briefly with Joe Pass. He's the greatest jazz guitarist in the world, dead now. And then studied with, when you say Frederick Node in the 70s and 80s had a PBS show called Playing the Guitar, and one of the popular pedagogical books is by him. As a matter of fact, many pedagogical books, but not the only one. I'd have to change some of the fingering on that, but that's a whole other matter. So I studied with him also at his house and also at a university briefly. Okay. So those were the, what should we say, formal ways of studying. And then there's yourself. And what is that? And I go, it's self-discovery. It's all about personal improvement. So I'll give you an example. People say, you play that, you're going to improve the piece. I go, nobody can improve the piece. The piece is done. The piece is there. It's sitting there. There it is, the Bach Bourrée number 2 from X Lute Suite. And I said, the piece is done. It's right there. I go, the only thing you're improving is yourself. And therefore, you're going to have a more erudite interpretation of that work than without that improvement. The crudities, to hewn off the rough edges of the stone are the way to refine one's sensibilities. Right. And what is that? And I go, well, you're not even hearing it like other people are hearing it. You're hearing it in a different dimension, in a different world, in a place that takes work. It's like hollowing out that cave inside of you and making it into a pristine room. So it is you who are improving, and certainly not the piece.
Wow. That's quite profound. It reminds me of a quote by Plato, actually, which is, music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imaginations, and life to everything. Very, very, very famously. And it's interesting, and I want to rebound on a comment you made, which is to get to Pepe Romero, which I think was quite clever. You put it in the universe, and the universe show you a way. Was that understanding of the world always present in who you were, this sort of mastering the intangibles and this understanding of, call it the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it? Was that
in a way, I
think you?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. In a way, I think it's kind of the American heritage. And let me explain what I mean. So I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. Now, what does that mean? I go, well, it means you're not a Frenchman. It means you're not from Somalia.
Right.
And there are certain things, for example, it's not just a jingoistic patriotism, but the Constitution is the single most important political document ever created. Because what is it saying? I go, it is saying that all of God's children can bask in the light of freedom when institutions are established to defend and promote the ideals of that. And so I think I was very much that as a kid. And I think I was always, there's a saying that an American is never done. He's always becoming, constantly becoming. Who was I last week? Who am I this week? And that drive west is not just the physical territory to get to California, but it is the drive west to move forward. And I think that was always inculcated into me by my environment, just by growing up in Southern California. Even though I've been all over Hell's Half Acre and around the world and that, but the Southern California is my home. By the way, I want to tell your listeners, because they're going to know this and it's going to be very timely. I was born in Pacific Palisades.
Oh, wow.
So that means it doesn't exist anymore. The fires.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. So I want to tell a quick story about the Pacific Palisades because it's so timely with the fires. And where is Pacific Palisades now? And my answer is up in smoke. It does not exist. So when I was in my mother's belly, my father and mother, who lived in Pacific Palisades, had a house that looked out over a polo field. It was like on a cliff kind of, hill. And then my mother and father during breakfast would watch the polo players practice and have breakfast out on the veranda. And then one morning my mother's water broke and my father just literally drove her down 5 minutes away to Santa Monica, St. John's Hospital, which is just minutes away. All Santa Monica, Malibu, these Pacific Palisades, they're all in a very close region there.
Okay.
And very in where I lived anyway. And so my telling you this because later on that football field, that polo field became the football field of Palisades Charter High, which you've seen in every coming of age film you ever saw. That is, Jeff Bridges went to that high school, lots of notables. And I go, oh, you've seen that high school. I go, there's the set for that. Well, fortunately, only half the buildings burned, but most of Pacific Palisades, I've been by that reservoir that they're talking about that was empty. Yeah,
Yes.
it held 457 million gallons and it was empty. Do you know how insane that is? That's
Right.
insane, right? And people say it would need to be repaired. I go repair it and then quick, now do it now. It's fire season. Are you crazy? So all that stuff, most of that could have been prevented. Terrible winds, that's true, but a lot of that could have been prevented. At least 50%.
Okay.
So anyway, Palisades, just telling you that because now, and I did 2 years ago, I went up by the old homestead and filmed a video. So one of the videos, I think Sigurenza by Torova from Castles of Spain is there, and the background of the Pacific Ocean, and you see this cliff, and that's right down from that is what used to be my house. So telling you that because went there a couple years ago to film and filmed other pieces. The videographer kept saying, keep moving back, Jonathan. Move back. I go, I'm on the edge of the freaking cliff, right? And I'm literally like 2 feet. I go, I am not moving back further. So, I go, I'll be in the ocean and probably dead on the way down.
Right. No, and talk about Southern California. Actually, it's a great bridge that you just offered me. After your formal education, obviously, you took a role as the head of music for Newport Institute. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
In Newport of Art, obviously, and it's very interesting because then you did a transition from a student under incredible, basically pioneers and people of the I'm sure was great mentors to you to an educator. Tell me more about that transitions and how was that for you?
Sure. So ever since I was about 16, I had like 30 private students. And when I wasn't going to school or studying on my own or, college and classes and all those things, I was earning a living. And so I had many students. And then later on, as time went on, I became head of a department of music in Newport Beach. And that's no longer there. That's many moons ago, Kimasabi. And so I did that because, a way to earn a living. I don't really teach much anymore. I have some videos on my YouTube channel.
Yes.
With that. But I don't really have students and teach anymore now because I'm busy filming on location. The last 2 weeks I was supposed to be filming in different parts of North Orange County, but it was raining like crazy. You couldn't do anything, right? There's no way.
Sure.
And also it was so goddamn cold. You get out there and you freeze in 10 minutes.
No, absolutely. So, if so, you were always somewhat of an educator, even at a young age. So I suppose that transition was quite smooth to you.
Yeah,
it was no problem from an academic standpoint, right?
Yeah, and then I taught some theory classes as well as private guitar students and other music classes.
Right, because you develop a curriculum for young musicians, which that would have been something, right? So you get there, develop this new curriculum. That's another thing as well, and I love to pick your brain on this because I was saying to you offline. You have a brain that is very extensive, not only in music but in all sorts of other basically topics that we were able to briefly discuss. You have a very
because I knew that the American school system was crap, and so I knew not to listen to some of the BS that was just nonsense and worthless. I realized I had an epiphany early on, and I said, my God, most of what I've learned is either incomplete or wrong.
Right.
Now, what do I mean by wrong? People say, well, you had to learn letters and you had to learn numbers and you put sentences together, so what you learned is wrong. I go, on the other hand, the paradigm, the shift of what I say, well, all their words are skew-wise, meaning that they're slanting it to a certain point of view. And I realized that I could never get anywhere if I listened to all that claptrap. And therefore went to educating myself, reading literature myself. I took a 5-year mission in my mind. I said, I'm going to read a good portion of literature. So I'd take the French, I'd take Voltaire, then maybe I'd take the English of William Blake, etc., and the Bard of Avon, etc., and started reading and studying myself, because I didn't want to hear the noise of what the school system is, the propagandizing and that. I'll give you an example.
Please.
So, Ray Bradbury, who I met 4 times, is the great author of Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, and many other stories. Something Wicked This Way Comes, just so many wonderful things. And he was going to go to LA City College. And then he was literally there on campus signing up for the classes and all that. And then he stopped himself and he said, wait a minute. If I go into this institution, become institutionalized like so many people, I will lose my freedom of thinking. I will lose the arena. Now, the contrary argument is that, well, you're so ignorant, you have to learn something. I go, yeah, but how do you learn it? And in what manner is it presented?
Yes.
I mean, they'll say this is positive and you should think that. This is negative and you should not think that. So what did he do? I go, he spent 5 years going every day to the LA library. Now, a lot of people think that's, crazy. I go, oh, that's what he did. He would get up. He would get to the LA library. I think he lived in Venice at the time. And he would put his hands on the stacks and the books and all that. And he'd say, if this one called to him, he would pull it out.
Right.
And start reading. And I go, look what happened. I go, he became one of the great fantasy sci-fi authors, however you want to look at it. He was a poet. He wrote the screenplay for Moby Dick, the 1953 John Huston picture. Martian Chronicles is a great story. We're on other stuff. I could go on about, his writing. Sure. When I met him, but I go, look what he did. He educated himself, and I go, became one of the leading authors of 20th century. Library of America has his whole series. I mean, that's how important he is.
Absolutely, and it reminds me of Aristotle, actually, that said, "Those who knows do; those who understand teach." There's a degree of mastery necessary, or at least should have a degree of mastery to teach. The standards are perhaps, let's say, change quite a bit. But you seem to always been quite an autodidact, right? Somebody that just says, you know what, I want to learn about this topic. Let me just go down and do it. You don't need anyone. You don't need anybody's basically to give you the heads up to do that. Was that something that was within what I call basically your blood in your family? Were other people like this, just very much kind of nose on?
Well, my mother and grandmother were very free-minded, free-thinking people. That's true, and I will say that where you live and your environment definitely has an effect and rubs off on you in some way. And freedom means the freedom to offend, to make mistakes. You can never tell the truth if you're afraid of offending. It's impossible because you're afraid of offending. So if you have to sacrifice, so if you say, okay, I don't want to offend, I go, okay, remember, truth now is being sacrificed. Because that, if you can't tell them the truth because they'll be offended, I go, then, you're sacrificing that. So I think that, priorities are different with different people. And there are many cultural, what should we say, the right emphasis on the right syllable, right? So if you emphasize this, then sometimes that means, you're excluding that.
Exactly. No, absolutely. It's very interesting because the free thinkers, and when you think of great literatures, and I think that's unfortunately, I was talking with a writer, an incredible writer of modern times, and I was talking to her about what I believe to be the golden age of writing, very much the 19th century, with all the great minds that you have in mind. But it's so interesting, the fact that, like you said, there's this queuing way of viewing the world, specifically from an academia sense of things, where it's they're maybe not tangibly lying, but they're elaborating their ideas in such ways that they are basically controlling a narrative. I think it's the best way to take a look at it. And that, unfortunately, restrain your mind and you restrain your capabilities to just be not only who you are, but who you're meant to be. If you're always telling the same people from 5 to 16, 17, depending on where you are in the world, that this is true, this is false, just follow the right path, well, you just get a bunch of sheeps. And I think that's something that is quite unfortunate. And I think we share these ideas, which I think is quite lovely.
And that option now is gone from your mind.
Exactly.
And you don't even consider X as an option.
Right, and that's, for example, 1984, George Orwell, right? That's what he said. They're removing basically some words within our vocabulary, so we're not able to even imagine what that is, and therefore cannot combat it. And that's a little bit cynical, but unfortunately, there's definitely some of that happening in our world.
It's true. Double on good, Winston. Double on good. So, I mean that. One could say that those principles are going on and have been going on for years with 1984, because if they change history, try to rewrite history and I go, well, now the people don't have available to them these other ideas. So freedom is very important. It's the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, it's the first, you have the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, to be with people you want to be with. You're not plotting the deaths of millions, right? You're, maybe having a book club or whatever the hell it is. So, to be able to think freely, how does one arrive at happiness? You see? In other words, how do you arrive at these places? There have to be certain procedures. So I was always experimenting, always trying to push forward, and being able to weigh my options and consider things rather than having this is right and this is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And after your time, basically, being an educator, your career expanded basically internationally. And this was quite interesting. When I was diving deeper into that portion of your life, I was quite fascinated. So you actually represented the USA as a cultural specialist, basically, as that's what I was able to read in South America and in the Caribbean. Now, let me put it this way. Well, first of all, what is a cultural specialist? But also, can you share a memorable experience from representing basically the U.S. in such capability?
Sure. So a cultural specialist by the State Department is you're trying to, in Barbados, the Caribbean, not Barbados, Spain, America and the Barbadian government. Who did I meet in Chambers? Who was the president? He just died. I can't remember his name. And that you are basically trying to bring the cultures together so that there's better diplomatic relations with nations.
Right.
And so they sponsor things. I would do concerts down there, and in Brazil, you're mentioning, I have all sorts of adventures in Barbados. So that was like a big guitar competition, and I kind of won the night. And there were guitarists from all over France and Cuba and Brazil and lots of other places around the world. And all the other guitarists wanted to play their ethnic music. And I said, oh, that's your downfall. I don't want to hear your ethnic music. It's just a simple fact. I go, look, I'm not the audience. They are. Okay. So, I'm just telling you the truth. So, but they all wanted to play their folk songs and stuff like that. I go, that's not what they want to hear. And so I played the Bach Chaconne and a whole bunch of stuff. And the next morning I'm in a restaurant and I happened to be sitting at the bar. I didn't drink, but I was sitting at the bar because that was the space available. Sure. And I was looking up and there I was on the television and I made such an overnight sensation in that country and the country is very small, right? It's just a nation, right? Down and that. And you'd go to diplomatic parties all the time. There are tons of diplomatic parties. And one of our frigates came into Bridgetown, one of the American frigates, and I looked at that and I go, my God, I'm glad that thing isn't bearing down on me. I go, it's so intimidating. So you're in that diplomatic circle, and then you play for the ambassador's residence where there's lots of UN delegates, and I call them the glitterati of the societies, to raise money for the Special Olympics. It raised about $25,000, I think, for the Special Olympics. And the ambassador's wife was pissed off because she thought she could have raised more had she gotten the money after the concert rather than before the concert. It was very funny. She goes, and we were there talking after the concert in their residence, and like a party, a soiree. And she says, I should have collected money after. She kept doing that all night. But so many adventures and travels throughout the world. Had India. I played in places that were not just the usual Europe and North America, right? You would think Europe, you'd think North America, Canada, you would think all that, but that would be kind of like the normal places to play. But I also played in like the Philippines, Romania, many the Amazon, many exotic locations.
And truly, in one of the great quotes in music, I think it's by Henry Wadsworth, if I'm not butchering his last name, which is music is the universal language of mankind. And as a musician, obviously, Jonathan, you as you were traveling in all these places, these different cultures, stepping out basically to the world, as you like to say, do you believe, and it's more of a philosophical question, do you believe that there's music is not only intrinsic to the human experience, but also absolutely mandatory for this sense of the union between the species? One thing I always found incredible is you can be, for example, I'm in Quebec. Most people are French speaking, but you can listen to people singing in Russians, in Germans, people singing in all sorts of language, and you still love the goddamn music. There's something so incredibly, basically, I suppose, magnetic about it. What do you think that is? And just tell me about its importance from a worldwide perspective.
So not only I think is it human, but I think it's intrinsic in the universe. And let me explain myself.
Sure.
So one evening I was watching television and the Cassini probe was just going by Saturn. And I actually had seen the Cassini probe. That's another story. When I met the head of JPL. He gave me a private tour. Carl Sagan was going to be there, but he was in cancer treatments at the time. His friend was there and he's crying about his friend. And the Cassini probe is the one that went to Saturn with the nuclear powered stuff. And they're all upset it's going to blow up, and all that rigmarole. And I said, very doubtful. And so the Cassini probe took the light waves from the rings of Saturn and translated them to the corresponding frequency in audio, right? In other words, it said this light frequency is at 440. That's an A, for example. All right. Whatever the vibrations are, physicists know this better than me. And the rings of Saturn hummed at A minor. In other words, it was basically an A minor chord, a little bit out of tune. And I go, well, it wasn't tempered, and the universe has those variations and gradations. So I go, it makes perfect sense that it would not be in what we call tune, right? But why is that important? I go, because it means that intrinsically in the light that's emitted from our sun and billions of other suns and stars out there, right? Billions of galaxies. The vastness is incomprehensible. And I go, it means that within that structure that exists. Now, one argues the point, well, Pythagoras took the lengths, put objects on strings, took the lengths and, made the modes. Well, he did not make the modes. He discovered and, what should we say, established in a formal way the relations of these notes to one another, degree. And so people say, well, is it intrinsic? I go, it has to be intrinsic, because if Saturn is really humming at A minor, I go, that means that the whole universe has within us that potential. It's like pregnant with that, right? Pregnant.
Right.
Oh, I go, well, there's going to be a baby coming out soon. So do I think that it's intrinsic? Yes. Now let me give you another example on your excellent question. When I was in India, I was playing in Bombay. They call it Mombasa? No, Mumbai. Mombasa is the African one. Mumbai. And at the time, it's called Bombay. And I'm playing at the National Theater. And that's like their Lincoln Center. Well, in America has a Lincoln Center, on the East Coast, right?
Sure.
And I go, well, that's their Lincoln Center. And I also played in the far south. They have an exact replica of Albert Hall that I played in Madras, India. So now I'm playing at the National Theater and do the concert. And then, but after I had gotten back home to California a month or so later, I was sitting in the office of my manager in Newport Beach. And he said, Jonathan, we got a letter. And I said, oh, okay. What is it? It was from India. And I go, oh, that's interesting. And so he goes, open it. You won't believe it. I mean, read it. You won't believe it. He'd opened it already. And it was from a gentleman who had gone to the concert in Bombay, and he was going to kill himself. That day and that evening, he was going to commit suicide. And he said, and the title of the letter said Shanti, which means kind of like peace and love and all that.
Sure.
And he said he heard the concert and it healed him, and he did not kill himself. Now, the manager and I looked at each other, and the manager said, that was worth the whole tour right there, Jonathan. And I go, I know exactly what you mean. So, talking about people, talking about cultures, whether it's the Indian culture, whether it's the North American culture, Canada, America, that. And I agree with you that there is a communication that occurs. It transcends time, transcends culture, transcends all the racial things. And so to answer your question, do I think music is intrinsic? And it is, it is something that is part of the universe that we're connected to, that has great power in many ways. It can be healing to some. I've seen it heal other people too, where they were so ill with something that it helped them.
It's an art form that there's very few things in the world, period, actually, but specifically non-visuals, right? Music, you can take a look at a concert, but you can also just listen to it. And the fact that it drives so many emotions is sort of incomprehensible, actually. It's incredible. You can listen to music that makes you laugh. You can listen to music that makes you afraid, that makes you cry, the range of emotion is so vast and so incredible that it's always been amazing to me. The other thing as well is also the length, right? Because cinema, for example, does the exact same thing, but it may take 40 an hour, 2 hours basically for you to experience that emotion. With music, it can take a few notes, few seconds. Boom, you're right with the music. Like my father would say. My father is very much of a audiophile, very very big music lover, and it's extraordinary. And that's why I always thought, and I think it's more than a thought. I just think it's a fact. And I thank you for elaborating basically on your mind as well, that there must be some type of neural pathways, some type of basically tunnels that makes us one with the music, that makes us transcend basically with music. And it's always been quite extraordinary. The other thing as well, Jonathan, that I think was very important within your mission is being a pioneer basically in digital recording. So as you were obviously wanting to share music with as many people as possible, you were one of the first basically in the 90s to actually create an extensive catalog. I think it's something like 300 tracks, if I'm not mistaken. That's
310.
Yeah, 310. See?
20.
Okay, 320, good. So to actually basically go digital with, because, and I'm citing you here, I'm quoting you here because I think it was quite beautiful. But you said, my goal has always been to make classical guitar music accessible to everyone, everywhere. Tell me more about if you think you were able to achieve such a goal, and tell me how it makes you feel to now be able to be in a place where, that goal was perhaps achieved.
Sure. So when I was 24, about that time, I had pretty much mastered what I call the traditional classical guitar repertoire, English Spanish masterpieces, Bach, lute suites, things of that nature, Giuliani, Soar, Tarrega. And so then what do? You see where to go. And you got to do something. And what did I do? I said, I set out trying to transcribing and learning new pieces. Now, you'd go on tour and then you'd come back and lay down some tracks, as the saying goes, right? Put it in the can. And in those days, I had the first record deals I had were here in America, but then I went over to Europe on the Empire Master Sound label, and I traveled over there. And in those days, you had to carry the tapes. Now, people say, why didn't you mail them? I go, are you crazy? I go, you could lose them. All sorts of things can happen.
Oh, yeah.
I go, you're not in control of any of that. If you have them in your hand, you are in control of them, right? So I go, it's very different. Now you just email the damn file, right? It means it's nothing, right? So I would do many different recordings in many different ways, and I would do that in between tours. And pretty soon, I said, I better tamp down that touring stuff if I'm going to create more, if I'm got to be home to do that, right? In other words, I got to be more there. Now, when I say I have 320 tracks, that's not even counting the 200 videos I have. So I have like 520.
Sure.
So that on the YouTube channel, there's about I think it's like 190 something. And, I have, that's additional to the audio stuff. And so, what do? You work you work on it. You learn the pieces, you transcribe them, you record them, you engineer them, you produce them, et cetera, et cetera. And people say, well, isn't that hard? I go, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what makes it valuable, perhaps, right? There's anything valuable must be hard to a certain extent. I'm wondering as well. One thing that I always and again, my dad being such an audiophile, we talk music very often, every single week at the very.
Well, that's great for you that your dad is like that because he influenced you then in doing that. What type of music does he like?
He's very big into classic rock. So basically, he loved classic music as well. Vivaldi a lot, Mozart a little bit. We listened to a lot of Bach together. Chopin. So he loves everything that is very, very, very eerie, basically. So anything basically.
Very eclectic.
That's right. Exactly. Yes, exactly right. So, for example, his favorite band of all time is Led Zeppelin.
I'll tell you a quick Bach story.
Please.
So Bach, as I said earlier, he was a Kapellmeister, meaning a choral conductor and organist in Curtin and Weimar. At that time, what was called the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It wasn't Germany yet. That's a long time later. And and I told you about his journey to go see the piano, which he didn't like. But I'll tell you something that happened a couple generations earlier. His three sons were prominent musicians and composers, but nobody is Bach. I go, he's it. He's the man.
Okay.
Food. And so what happened to Bach? I go, think about it. Now he's dead. He dies 1685 to 1750. His life is the measurement of the Baroque era. The other key figure of the era is Handel, right? And then the second rank is like Telemann and Vivaldi. But Bach is the towering genius of that era and probably of all composers, although Beethoven's up there for the 19th and Stravinsky for the 20th. So now he croaks. Then what happens to his music? Now here's the question, right? Okay, there he is. He's pushing up daisies. And now what happens to his compositions? Well, show you how well respected he was by his wife, Anna Magdalena, in which he wrote his famous notebook for. I go, she would use the manuscripts to light the fireplace because she needed something to ignite the wood because it's freaking cold, right? And so his music became relegated to the stacks in what we call Austria now.
Sure.
And what happened? I go, it laid there for 80 years. It laid in a library, a lot of it, most of it, we should say. And along came a little guy, 23-year-old, called Felix Mendelssohn. And what did he do? I go, well, at the time he was a conductor. He wasn't known so much yet as a composer. Of course he was, and later on we know his compositions. But I go, he wanted to make a big splash with the Viennese public, right? He wanted to make a big entrance into high society, into the musical literati. And so he's looking around the library for music, and he discovered the St. John and St. Matthew Passion. And he said, my God, this is incredible greatness. They rehearsed it, he put it on, and this is how Bach's music became discovered once again in civil society.
Wow. That's it. I didn't know this story. This is incredible.
So I go, it could have been caught in a fire or something, right?
That's right.
It could have just been so moldy, that you can't read it. And,
yeah, exactly.
Lots of things could have happened.
It happened to other basically art forms. Basically, in the past, take a look at the Library of Alexandria, for example. That's one very famous one that obviously burned on under fire. But you're right. It's actually quite extraordinary that they were found in again conditions good enough.
So pardon me for interrupting. So I'll give you one thing with the Palisades fire. Arnold Schoenberg is the inventor of 12-tone music or dodecaphony. Arnold Schoenberg. He lived and worked in L.A., and this is an Alban Berg, his opera Wozzeck, and this was the 20th century after Stravinsky, where music went. And Wagner started the breakdown with chromaticism of the tonality, and then Schoenberg finished it off. And so Arnold Schoenberg's son, is it Larry? Maybe Larry Schoenberg, lived in Pacific Palisades, and he had this little shed, and he had 10,000 of his father's manuscripts. Guess what happened? They burned. That's right. So they no longer, now I don't know whether they took photos, digitized them, I don't know anything about that. But I know that, those originals are now gone. Where are they? I go, up in smoke, like the rest of Pacific Palisades.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a way, that that's the opposite of what happened with Bach, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And there's and I'm sure you have an emotional connection to that region, obviously being from there. So, obviously sincere, I
It's
suppose.
ridiculous. It never should have happened. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my damn life. Burn off any idiot knows you burn off the fuel, meaning the dry leaves. You have water in the reservoir, so when the firemen go up there and they have pressure for the pumps, because those fire engines only hold about 2,000 gallons. As I said, the reservoir is 460 or 57 million gallons. I go, that's plenty of water for what they need. And it is true that the winds were high. But, the environmentalists said, oh, we can't let the little fishy or little bunny or whatever be. And I go, well, and you destroy the city, it's gone. There's no, it's like the library at Alexandria in Egypt,
Yep.
I mean, like Nero in Rome burning, playing violin. I go, it's total government incompetence. Well, I've given my opinion now.
That's right. That's right. We live in a free country, so you're alter your opinion. And talking about giving your opinion from a digital standpoint, one thing that I always love to ask musicians like yourself is when you're thinking about the impact of obviously digital technology on music distributions, but I will go as far as saying on music period, on how not only we digest it, but we create it also, because there's something, and I'm not a musician, but obviously it's I think quite obvious from just studying music history. There's something incredibly lively and I suppose beautiful when it comes down to a musician performing in front of an basically audience, right? That's why we do this for thousands of years. Now there's a lot of artists in which their music are distributed solely online. They do one concerts every few years, if any.
True.
So tell me more about how you see that they're basically impacting, not only the way we digest music, but the way we create music, and perhaps your opinion on it, as you are a man of opinion.
I think that we're going to have more live performances as AI. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits as AI. I think Drake or somebody had a lawsuit for AI. But as you start to imitate and do that and try to push the musician out and make money from the other, that's the one of the results. I go, you're going to have live performance. I think people are going to want it more. And I think that there's nothing like a live concert.
Yeah.
Nothing like it. The record is great. It's fine. It's wonderful. It's its own thing. That's good too. You can have it at home or in your car or whatever, but there's nothing like going to a live concert.
Exactly. And it's Bono that was saying, music can change the world because it can change people. And
he's right.
Well, absolutely. And when you're thinking also about, and let me ask you a personal question, actually.
Sure.
Were you the type of musician that was creating an emotional bond with his audience? Were you
always
connecting on that front? Yes.
I think that a computer can always play faster and more accurately than a person, but there's nobody there. So you got to be there. And I think that to communicate, there is a great Asian artist, I won't mention his name, who said, and now he's older, and he said, I always thought I had to have a perfect concert. It bored the crap out of me. And then he realized that it's all about making a connection and an emotional thing with the audience. And I said, I knew that when I was 10, and it's not like he's not a great player. He's a great player. But his culture emphasized that. His culture was saying, number one, you've got to be perfect and all that stuff, which is why the kids kill themselves at 13. So, that standard. And I go, well, the perfection, you'll never reach perfection. I don't want to be perfect. So when people say, oh, you did a perfect piece, I go, let me show you what it means to be perfect. It means I'm complete. And I can't grow because if I'm perfect, why do I need to grow? So I go, if I'm perfect, that means I'm dead because I can't grow. I'm a living thing that grows, right? So, some of those ideas are very deleterious to a good concert.
For you, what type of mindset do you adopt basically before stepping on stage, is there anything basically, are you somebody of rituals? Is there anything basically you do personally to
find the quietest, you find the quietest place inside of you. And that place is, let's say, a room or a dimension where you are coming from. And by doing that, the audience can feel your heart. They grab your heart, so to speak. And when they do that, and I go, that's what it means to be you. So you're communicating on a very fundamental level. So when you said, beyond cultures, music, and all that stuff, and I go, of course. I go, you're a living human being. And whether you live now in 2025, or you're living in 1740, or, the year 3000, you're still that.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I want to honest with Jonathan is now, and this is just me digesting music as a 20 years old person just going into the world, there's this sort of overarching, I'll go as far as saying trend, where music is being simpler and simpler. We're seeing basically now driving genres, and obviously pop was never the most complicated basically type of music, but now with the rise of hip hop and rap, and there's still a few that I think are extraordinary, but we definitely see basically, I will go as far as saying regressions of complexity within the music landscapes. What do you think is the future for classical, obviously guitar and classical music in general, which, as you said, always been very, very complex, very rich, very basically, I suppose, complete, as that's a term you use in your descriptions. Where do you see that evolution basically coming from? And perhaps do you see yourself as part of that evolution?
Sure. Okay, so go back to the beginning there. You're saying that simplistic. Well, simple can be good or it can be bad, but
sure,
many of the artists today have nothing to say and they keep saying it. So you have to have something to say. When you step out on stage, I would be mortified if I didn't know, let's say, that Bach piece, that Bach prelude, whatever it is, and I didn't know it correctly and be able to communicate it to the audience. I would consider it extremely arrogant if I didn't have the skills to communicate that within the genre that I'm communicating. Now, where do I think it's going? I think that the major minor system is exhausted, and that after Stravinsky and the ballets, there was nothing, in my view, that had anything to say. But that's not to say Philip Glass is wonderful with his ostinatos, for example, his opera, Nixon or whatever. And I think that you can continually rework that. But orchestration is very different, meaning the instrumentation that is expressing the piece, than the content of the music itself. The music itself must be pure, and then you can orchestrate it, whether it's on an organ, whether it's on a guitar. Those are a whole different thing. Orchestration is separate from the content of the music, although most people don't hear it that way. I said, well, you could play the same line on the opening line of Le Sacre du Printemps by Stravinsky. You could... Now, that's on a bassoon. Could be done by a clarinet, could be done by a trumpet, could be done by a cornet, could be done by a saxophone, could be done by a classical guitar, could be done by a violin, blah, 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 ad infinitum. So when people say, but it's perfect on the bassoon, they go, yeah, maybe. Yeah, and I go, you have to arrive at something. You got to finally, have something. Otherwise, there's no music. But on the other hand, you could reorchestrate that thing completely different. Not that say it's not wonderful, because it is life-changing. As Pierre Boulez said, this Rite of Spring is the birth certificate of the 20th century. Music.
Beautiful. Do you have any up-and-coming project that we should be on the lookout for, Jonathan?
I'm out there filming videos when it's not too goddamn rainy and cold, and I have perhaps sheet music publishing of some of my arrangements. I'm talking with a few different people actually on this regard. Isn't nothing settled yet. And also I have a couple people I'm speaking with regarding syncing, in synchronizing meaning in films, in videos, in commercials, and that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Extraordinary. Well, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Mr. Jonathan Taylor, was an absolute pleasure.
That was Eleanor Roosevelt, I think.
That is exactly right.
And
you see?
So I will give my final quote. I remember, the dream is for free. The hustle is sold separately without batteries.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on a Meaningful Podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. And can't wait to see up and coming projects. Obviously, people can find you on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, pretty much everywhere you'd like.
The easiest thing is if you just type Jonathan Taylor guitar into Google, you'll find a million things. And if you don't put the guitar, you'll get a black football player. And I know I look like a black football player, but I am not a black football player. All right. And he's a wonderfully talented gentleman, too. I hope to meet him someday in the future. But just Jonathan Taylor guitar into Google, you'll find every damn thing in the world.
There we go. Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.